Delighted we get to join once again in this pursuit of wholeness and well-being, living in and as the truth of what we were created to be, confronting all the lies of the mind, all the habits of the mind that make up silly things to take the place of truth. Silly things like somebody else is to blame for what's moving inside of me. Somebody else is the creator of my life. And so it's all about a big wake-up call. And we're here to bring forward new and deeper levels of understanding of this first century Aramaic mindset that gives us just so much advancement that by the average mind it's inconceivable that it's even possible that it could be done. So delighted that you're here to be part of the conversation. And Ms. Jeannie, do we have any questions in the chat room, anything happening in the phone queue, or do we have any questions via email or what have you?
No, and no. So it's all yours.
Is quiet. Well, let's go back to the completing the Beatitudes from the Aramaic.
A hand just went up.
Well, then let's say hello to the hand.
I believe it's Miss Susan, 610. You're on the air.
Hi, friends.
Welcome, dear heart.
Hi. I've been thinking about the conversation you had with Celinda last, was it Friday?
Right.
On faking it till you make it versus hypocrisy.
Right.
And I had a thought. I think
share it, please.
Well, faking it until you make it is like setting an intention. And if we have an intention, it means that we haven't done it yet. We're busy working on it. And I have the intention to be kind and so forth, to set my Rahman Puba so that my filters are in order, and sometimes I even picture this helmet going on my head, porous helmet,
right.
With certain grids, certain things can go in and come out, and certain ones can't. But I have often wondered about hypocrisy too, and I've decided that that's not hypocritical if you fake something, provided you're not faking it so that it's an ego trip for you, or I want to appear really loving here. I want people to think I'm this loving person, so I'm going to act a certain way, and the intent is good, but there's also kind of a folding back on the self to look good. And I've questioned myself about that. Well, I don't have much more to say, just that I think faking it till you make it is what we've got to do, because we haven't been doing certain wonderful things that we want to do, but it can get dicey.
Well, for me, on Friday.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, for me on Friday, I found it kind of humorous because I'd never heard of or thought of hypocrisy in any form of positive light whatsoever. And I'm looking at the dictionary definition right now, at least one of them, the practice of professing beliefs, feelings, or virtues that one does not hold or possess. And to me, fake it till you make it says, well, to use an example, so I'm really angry, but I want to be a loving person, so I'm going to speak lovingly to this person. I'm going to fake it. It's not true. It's not actual. But I'm doing it as a way to lead my mind into going along with my new chosen path when my mind really isn't in agreement. So to me, it was the first time I've ever thought of hypocrisy in a positive light. And I mean, it does when I say to somebody, oh, I cherish you, when I'm really feeling peeved at them, I'm perfectly in alignment with the definition of hypocrisy, professing beliefs, feelings, and virtues I do not hold, and doing it for a constructive reason. I want to shift and change my mind. So it had just never occurred to me as a positive use for the word hypocrisy, but I thought it was kind of a cool, for me it was a cool new insight to think of it in that way.
Well, don't you think hypocrisy implies something not so good? I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
I mean, I've never thought of hypocrisy in any positive light whatsoever ever in my life until we had that conversation the other day, and then I realized that, well, here's the definition, and if I'm faking it till I make it, positive reason, it is a constructive, positive use of hypocrisy, of doing something that really isn't genuine.
Yeah,
but doing it for a positive reason rather than being disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, but you're doing it with awareness. And so if you do it with awareness, it's not hypocrisy anymore. I mean, we're nitpicking now. I agree with you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I would not.
I think a lot of hypocrites know exactly what they're doing. I think a lot of hypocrites in the negative sense of the word know exactly what they're doing. It's done with awareness. I think it's, in fact, in many cases done purposely. You look at the political scene and you watch when you hear the open mic when somebody's not aware the microphone's on and they are absolutely in the negative realm and playing hypocritically, and they know it. That'd be my take. But anyway, I found it was kind of humorous, and for me it was putting a positive slant on something I'd never had a positive slant on before. And I've done that in the past. You know, I've used that idea of, geez, this isn't really how I'm feeling, but I'm going to do it because I want to move in that direction. I want to move my own mind. So.
Yeah, but you'd never call it hypocrisy then because you're fully aware. You're not two-faced. It's so different. You're talking about a really two-faced thing going on in the political scene. But I would never. I mean, I'm sure you've had many times when you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I bet with many times you've been kind, and when you're probably feeling frustrated, but I wouldn't call that hypocrisy. It's faking it till you make it, and I think that's a wonderful thing. If you just keep aligned with your best intention. Where I don't think the hypocrisy we see out in the political scene is necessarily that at all. But again,
I know it's not that. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact negative twist. I'm in agreement. Yeah. Just heading in the right direction, hopefully, all of us.
Yeah.
Any word from your nephew?
Oh, he's been sending me, he's blocked. He manages to send something in a way like on Facebook or something. I've blocked any messenger things from him.
Right.
It's very interesting on Facebook. He's been sending 3 people at once, my daughter, her new husband, and me. And so I get them. But when I open up the messenger, anything he says, because he's saying it to all 3 of us, is not blocked to my son-in-law. So we all get it. But there are slots underneath where his text would have gone that say, this message has been blocked. But if you click on it, it'll unblock it right there, and you can read what they said. So,
right.
You know, it's a tricky little thing. I mean, Facebook's trying very hard to do what they can. So I get these, and sometimes if I'm curious and he's answering, since I'm not speaking to him, he's not answering me necessarily.
Right.
He may say something nasty about me, but so I may click on one to see what was said to somebody else, but I tend not to open them at all now.
Yeah.
And he does send.
Sounds wise.
He does send TikTok things, little videos that have to do, I'm sure, with trying to correct his grandmother for her completely unenlightened, abusive behavior.
Right.
And I just delete them. So I'm not looking at anything. My daughter's in a tremendous dilemma, though, because she has bought an airline ticket to go to his graduation, thinking that she might not go. She wants to keep the door open, but she knows that if he sees her there, he'll get a kind of satisfaction, but he'll mistreat her. If she doesn't go, he will play the victim and say, my parents didn't even come.
Right. Yeah.
They're that bad. And so she does her own kind of wake up. She's being a priest and one with real integrity. She says, my work as a priest is keeping me sane and well and centered, but I find my creativity has died back and my energy to do certain projects. I've got so much psychic energy going toward my son that I'm not speaking to. She said it's just hard to be well. Yeah, so that's where she's at. Yeah, I know. She
would love to breathe her.
Well,
she would
terrible
probably
success
find
I had with breathing. Maybe she'd do better than I did. Maybe she'd do better than I did if it's genetic. I had such a hard time with it.
I think she'd
have to find my way without it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think that she would unload a lot of energy if she were to step into it. If you happen to get face to face with her, I'd guide her through a session if I were you. Give her some, I think, tremendous relief in communicating with him. One of the things I quizzed him about was, if he had any idea of what the word projection meant, because he's sure that he knows all about everybody and everything, and he doesn't appear to have any idea that everything he's saying about you, about his mom, which is pretty, as you say, is pretty nasty. He has no idea. He's describing his own mind. And the behaviors that you have, he's describing literally the behaviors he's doing right there in the text. But that's the challenge with the addicted mind.
Oh, my God, it's so hard. And I talked to Luke about him. Luke feels responsible because he introduced weed and alcohol to Jacob when they were teenagers. And he feels responsible. So we spent quite a lot of time talking him out of that and, letting that go. Jacob is an adult. He has choices he could make. But it's painful for Luke. He's still sober and he's doing very well, but struggling about Jacob. So anyway, thanks for asking. You get the full load every time you ask.
Well, we'll continue to hold the space, and I hope he unblocks me and continues the conversation, but he's blocked me at this point, so.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of rage.
Oh, my God, yes. And fear, terror. He's going to be out on the street. You're making me homeless. And I'm thinking, well, that looks as if that's the way you're going. No choice of ours.
Holding the space for a wake-up.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for talking to him.
All right, dear heart. All right, blessings.
All right. Hey, you too.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, Miss Jeannie, we clear to go on with the Beatitudes?
I think so. Go for it.
Okay. Well, we've covered the first two that have not to do with being poor in spirit, but rather having a home in the active forces from the Creator. And one that does not have to do with mourning your wrongs and being comforted, but rather those who honor truth and profess one's own errors and the errors of one's society, being freed of mental stress. And then the third one, traditionally historically it's translated as, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. And in Aramaic, what it says is those who have humility. The word is mahik, M-A-K-I-K-H in Aramaic, which is humility. And humility has nothing to do with the Greek idea we've been fed of, if you've got humility, you're crawling in the earth like a worm. But rather, humility in Aramaic is defined as a mental quality of perceiving and cooperating. So this includes perception and behavior, perceiving and cooperating with the good desires of others. For they shall gain the earth, the inherit, this kind of a thing. No, this is a very active thing that Yeshua was talking about. So cultivating literally the ability to perceive, to set one's mind so that one is able to perceive and cooperate with that which is in the upper end of the scale for people, the good desires of others. The next of the Beatitudes classically is interpreted as, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they shall be fulfilled. In Aramaic it says the Creator implant in your mind neural structures which will guide you when they are active. If they are inactive, you who follow these instructions will come into conscious possession of and be able to use this latent guidance system designed to make available thoughts and actions that will increase your happiness and well-being. You who have the mind structure underlying the attitude, judgment, and behavior described as just and fair behavior between people. You shall achieve it. The next beatitude, again, historically interpreted as, blessed are the merciful, they shall obtain mercy. In Aramaic, there's that whole preceding statement that talks about this. This is a way to activate a neural structure in you to guide, that your mind becomes a guide to take you to happiness and well-being. You who have Rachma have this filter active in the frontal lobes of your brain that encompasses both your judgment and your behavior, ends up in producing judgment and behavior that's based in love. And what it says is, by holding to that energy, you'll receive that in return. So rather than being merciful, it's got to do with a condition of mind, holding to a condition of mind. The next one, again, historically interpreted as, blessed are the pure in heart, they shall see the Creator. In Aramaic, preceded by the Creator planted in your mind these neural structures, meant to guide you. They become active if they are unconscious, if they are inactive. And here's one of the other steps, one of the other things that produces that result in your mind. And that is you who have a completely purified mind. What would a completely purified mind look like? It would look like a mind that is incapable of generating any form of hostility or fear. Unfortunately, I've never met anybody who lives in that realm. I know many people, including myself, who are working toward it on a daily basis, but one of the ways to activate the underlying neural structure, the guidance system for happiness and well-being, is that you purify your own mind. And what that beatitude says is, rather than they shall see the Creator, in Aramaic it says those who have a completely purified mind will comprehend the invisible source of creation. So we'll come to a point where we begin to comprehend. The mind will move out of the way, and comprehension will come for deeper and deeper levels of understanding of the Creator and relationship. And then blessed are the peacemakers is the historical interpretation of the last one we're going to talk about. They shall be called the children of God. You who, in Aramaic, you who through service work effectively to produce the peace and understanding under and in accord with the Creator's will, you will be called the offspring or the children of the Creator. So each of those steps are steps that will take us in the direction of living in this space of active present love. The next beatitude speaks of being scorned, that if you bring forward a space of conscious active present love, the tendency will be that those around you who have not that mindset will tend to find it easy to project onto that mindset. And my take would be that then gives the individual who would be scorned or attacked for that understanding or holding that space, it would lead to the next level of that person learning to forgive whatever is in them that would lead to attack, that would invite another to bring on some form of an attack. And the next one speaks about being harassed and scorned because of being connected to a teaching that takes people to the space of active present love. And basically, the bottom line of these last couple of Beatitudes is a cautionary warning that just says, if you choose to step outside of the culture's norms, if you choose to refuse to play in the realm of hostility and fear, that there will be a tendency for people to project whatever it is they haven't dealt with on that clear space. It takes a tremendous amount of learning to stay centered in the presence of love when some of the crazy stuff shows up. We're on page, let's see, what are we at here? Page 41, line 12. Rejoice and be happy, joyful at the increase in your reward in this community of love, that the increase in the presence of love in your own physiology, if there is such harassment, because it's been going on for a long time. It speaks of, that this is what's happened to the prophets before you. It's been going on for a long time. And, to me, I think we're at a point where there is enough true teaching out there, people truly doing the work, that we're getting close to a shift, getting close to a change in the upward direction. Then it goes on to say, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt becomes tasteless, with what will one salt? For such is of no use but to be trodden underfoot by men. Now, salt in that world was a very valuable resource. It was used for a fertilizer in soil. It was used to sterilize, antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, and it was used to access flavor. And if the presence of active love, the flavor would be the metaphor here, goes out of the salt, the active component in the salt disappears, then what use is it but to be trodden underfoot? And so it will be with those who lose, I think Peter's reference, or Paul's reference, pardon me, where he talks about, if I have not loved, then I'm like a tinkling cymbal. He's talking about this very principle. If the actual presence of love is lost, then one doesn't even have a human life. And that's when self-destruction occurs. And 14 goes on to say, yours is the light of the world of humans. That if we bring this state of active present love, this state of Rahma forward into the world, then it's time to put it out there and make it available to the world. You do not light a lamp and set it under a basket, but put it in a high place that sheds its light to everyone in the household. So in like manner, let your light. And one of the websites you might want to check out for Aramaic work is Noora, Noohra, which means light.com. That's Dr. Rocco Arrow, and he's got a lot of links, a lot of material that is very useful in understanding the Aramaic. And 17, think not that I am come to release the ties of the law. Men have always wanted to get out from under the law. You hear people say, oh, we're not under the law anymore, we're under grace. Well, I want to see you step off a cliff and tell me that you're not under the law of gravity. And people in that time spoke of law in many cases as what were the habits, what were the customs of the people. And Yeshua did not speak in terms of the customs of the people. You'll see in the text here he uses the word namosa. Namosa meaning the way this energy system called life operates or works, rather than the customs of the people, which can be way off base for the truth of the way it works. And he says very clearly to those who are, jumping up and down saying, well, we're not under the law anymore. I come not to release the ties, but to add, to deepen your understanding of them. And he assures them that this process, this namosa, will continue through to the end of time. That is, it's not, nobody's getting out from under it, although lots of people dance around and jump up and down and say they're out. And it's like, good luck. So that's a big one to breathe on, because many people want to be free from the law. So, number 19, therefore whoever will break, and we have this mistaken, when we think in terms of the Greek translations, we tend to have this mistaken belief that a law can be broken. And my offering would be that it's absolutely impossible to break a law. You look at people in their sorrow, in their pain, their suffering, their diseases, and there's the result of, quote unquote, falling out of harmony with the law. Laws can't be broken. That's a misnomer. That's a Greek misnomer. We get broken on avoidable collisions with the law, and that's what every disease is. And that's one of the reasons with this work for at every minute you're vigilant in what you're doing with your own energy system. And in the primary level of energy, go back again to the opening words in the book of John, where it doesn't say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh, but says in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. And this work requires that at every instant you are cognizant of what you are doing with your mind energy. And if your mind energy is going in a direction that's based in hostility or fear, you make sure that you do the work of correction to reverse that. Because when you fall out of harmony with the way human life works, when you lose contact with your human life, then you literally enter into the energetic dynamic of creating disease. And forgiveness is about finding the energetic patterns with which we've fallen out of harmony. Again, number 19 says, therefore whoever will break, but in Aramaic, the shiri would be more of falling out of harmony with the commandments, the way that the energy system works. So he's saying that the one who falls out of harmony with the expression of how it works, however small, and teaches another to do that, will be called the least in the heavenly estate. In other words, we're going to lose our contact with our human lives, with ourselves, as the active presence of love. But he who lives in harmony with and teaches them shall be called great in the heavenly estate. Malkuta Dishmaya, the kingdom of love, the community of love. And so we are looking to confront, in particular, any habitual patterns of mind energy based in any form of hostility or fear, and be willing to bring them to correction and whatever lies beneath them, to apply the process of forgiveness to move out of those states tied into hostility or fear. And we're about the halfway point through the hour, Jeannie. So I'm going to just check in and see if we've got anything happening in the chat room or anyone in the phone queue with a hand up. You with us, Jeannie? Hello, Jeannie.
Yeah, my phone switched to another screen, and I couldn't get back to unmute myself.
I know how that goes.
There are no other hands up. If somebody presses 1, you're first in line.
So let's see if we've got anybody out there with a question. And I'm going to make a shift and go back toward the back of the text into the glossary, the dictionary, first century dictionary, and cover, just kind of skim through it or move through it and look at the definitions of these Aramaic words. And I think it will be with those brain cells firing, with that review or that in front of us, then covering the text material, I think will be more meaningful if we've got those thoughts. But before I do that, I'd like to just open the gate for anybody who's out there with a thought or a question for us. So all is quiet, sweetie?
Is all quiet.
All right. Cool. Then I'm going to go to, if you've got the text, I'm going to move to page 72, the Aramaic glossary, and start to look at some of the Aramaic words. and their definitions. So abde, serve with effect. Remember, we talked about in the Beatitudes, abde shlama is to work with effectively on behalf of, produced by service, bear to serve. So that particular use of it in the Beatitudes speaks of the reward that comes if you work effectively to produce the peace and understanding under and in accord with the Creator's will, abde shlama. And that this becomes one of the core principles that once you have contact with a higher level of understanding, I think it creates an obligation, number one, to live it, and number two, to extend it into the world. And the word goes on, abde, to, in Matthew 5:9, is serving. A variation on the theme in Matthew 7 is a servant, someone who's serving, to follow, to produce. So those who produce the peace and understanding under and accord with the Creator's will. And Abbe, father. Abid relates to Abde, but it was a particular group of Hebrews who really were devoted to social truth, who wanted to, and we'll be changing the next edition, we'll be getting rid of that word love of truth to honor truth, recognizing that love is a state of being, which we did not have the full clarity on when this was printed last, and that to use the word love to describe a state of affection towards something is error in the definition. To honor something, to honor truth is more correct directive to give the mind to keep it on track. So this particular group of people were a group that their whole thing was about, it wasn't about mourning their wrongs, as the Greeks translated there, those who mourn their wrongs. It's not as if you put on a long face and go around mourning, but rather that you honestly look for the places where your own perceptual mind is in error. How do you tell if your perceptual mind is in error? What's the measuring stick? Any time that your perception or my perception is based in any form of hostility or fear, we're in error. Hostility and fear doesn't signal that somebody else in the world screwed up, as those who live out of the one world universal religion of blame believe. But rather, hostility and fear is an indicator that comes from within oneself that whatever one is perceiving at the moment is off base. So this speaks of that group who were really devoted to social truth and faced their own errors, looked into their own errors, and were willing to look at the errors of their society and to deal with them. So the Abili was the name of that group. And it also ties into the service that they do, so it ties into that word abde. And then in John 1:14, Agan is dwelt, where one lived, Agra, where the wages, the earnings, the reward. As in Matthew 6:1, AK is a suffix put before a word that speaks of its status in the language as singular possessive of the prefixed word. So it gives several examples of kuntinak, which means it's a shirt, but it's yours, so it is indicative of your possession, your mantle, your neighbor. Here's a really important aspect of it, that the word neighbor is Carib, and when they spoke of, when the Greeks translated the words as loving your neighbor, it wasn't, the requirement was not to love your neighbor, because loving is not a verb. It's not something we do. It's what we are. When we bring who we are to our neighbor, then all of our behavior is going to be in alignment with love. But in Aramaic, it was to have Rachma for neighbor. And that when we did, then our mind would always be on track with humility and truth toward neighbor. So the whole structure of the language starts to make sense with the Beatitudes, with that idea of Rachma for neighbor, for the Creator, and that's the way one maintained one's own life. And Malkutak is to live in that community of love, or that kingdom, that realm, as opposed to the realm of hostility and fear. Sibyanan, as in Matthew 6:10, is, the will and the individual's will moving in a particular direction. And will is in Aramaic is seen as a spiritual faculty with which one is able to manage their own minds. It's nothing to do with willpower, the ego mind, the ego mind having a cheap copy of everything that's real in the spiritual dimension. Will is not willpower, I'm going to force something. It's to live in a state where I manage my own mind. I source from being the goals with which my mind is in service, and the things that direct behavior in my life are managed by my will. And then Ashak, as in Matthew 7:3, is friend. Again, this is all possessive, showing that it's something that belongs to the individual. AKH, fellow man, brother, friend. In other words, and this ties in with the idea of neighbor in Aramaic being a mental word. That neighbor is not about the guy who lives down the block, or the gal who lives down the block, as our culture would portray it. But in Aramaic, it's a mental word, and to think of someone is to make of them your neighbor. So it's a mental word. It's about someone being mentally near. Word is to recognize that your fellow man is your neighbor. Also referring to an other, to someone else, to another person, your fellow man, friends. If you looked at the different variations on the theme of this idea of someone who is connected with you simply by mental awareness, not necessarily physical proximity. And when you kind of grok the meaning of that whole idea, then you realize that the obligation of that law of having Rachma is one that isn't about your neighbor at all. It's about the condition of your own mind with which you approach the world and anyone in it. And interestingly enough, including yourself, because in Aramaic, you are your own neighbor. And therefore, you're required to maintain this condition of love, this condition of Rachma within your mind, or this filter keeps you in touch with the truth of yourself as the presence of love. And then when we get to Kuba, we'll take a look at that one. Akil Karsa as in Matthew 4:1-5 and 8, unrighteous, a force of unrighteousness, and when one's moving into some form of hostility or fear. And here's a word that was left in its original form, and because there's so much confusion and so many different misperceptions about the Creator, but Allah, that which was before the beginning of creation, the highest, the most ultimate, the most infinite, most unknowable, the ultimate source of truth, of what is, of what will be, and of glory. It represents God throughout the New Testament wherever it appears. The Muslim word of God, Allah, or Allah, is basically the same word. So in Aramaic, the word that would be represent the Creator would be Allah. And it would be the ultimate, ever-present source of love. Alma refers to the world of men. When we separate ourselves from being, we're now in this realm of Adam, Adamos, the red clay. So we see several variations on the theme of that, the world of men, the world of which is to come. Aplach, the verb to divide, to have, to separate. And then there's several variations on that, being divided, being separated from. And to recognize that the unifying force from that which would divide us, it's perception that divides us. Go back to Einstein and his brilliant observation. If you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. When people live in that optical delusion, they think there's somebody that it's okay to point hostility or fear at. Well, of course, that person is so terrible, they deserve my hostility, right? Well, gee, I observed what they were doing, and what they did was, you're right, it was pretty terrible. And, I would agree with you, they deserve it. But then when you realize that you're not separate from that, if you send that hostility toward this particular neighbor, who gets the original and who gets the carbon copy? And that other person may not be home for delivery. And so the original stays right where it is. So ultimately, this idea of separation does not govern perception when Rahma is active in the mind. There will be an underlying awareness of the connectedness of all life. And that it is our I that creates, as Einstein says, this optical delusion of separateness. Abala or Abali, as in Matthew 5:45, talks about wicked those who are out of alignment with truth. And then B apostrophe before many different words speaks of it's used as a prefix and refers to the departure from or with, by means of, through, and within. So in John 14:26, Yeshua speaks of as through me, Bishme, through me, Be'ruch, in Ruka. So one has their home, that beatitude that the Greeks totally just shattered and destroyed by speaking of being poor in spirit. Here's the word home. Here's where we have our home in these eternal forces. And that those eternal forces are active with and accompany one's own mind. B apostrophe dalguta, again, as in Matthew 5:11, deceitfully. So it's describing the motion of energies, conditions within the mind. Matthew 12:27, Beelzebub, the prince of evil, and again, evil being simply not a positive wrong, but rather out of alignment with truth. So evil relates to the word sin in Aramaic. Remember, the word sin is an archery term. When you fired at the target, if you missed the target, the scorekeeper yelled sin, you're off the mark. Pardon me, if you missed the bullseye, but if you missed the target altogether, then it was evil. It was totally off the mark. And those who would personify leading people in ways of thinking that are off the mark would be represented by this particular concept. And then barcho, as in Matthew 5:44, to become a blessing, that when one lives in this condition of Rapha, when one has their home in the eternal forces from the Creator, then the only thing that can extend from that person to others would be this active presence of love. And when that active presence of love extends to others, there's a tendency for that same condition to be active in another's mind. If there are 1,000 blocks to that condition being active in another's mind, then those blocks are going to tend to move and open, and that creates the kinds of circumstances that were talked about in those last few Beatitudes, where one is put upon by the world and given the opportunity to clean up the next level of their own minds. Batala, malicious, vain. Veiny, grass, dust, sawdust. Splinter, take the splinter out of your brother's eye while you have a beam in your own. Bay is to strengthen, to encourage, to uplift. When one has Rahma active in their minds, there is the resonant energy of upliftment to everyone who is in the space of that presence of love. And or of course it opens the healing process where one gets to process through that which is holding one back from being in that uplifted state. So that nitbeun, that beatitude of they shall be comforted. And then tying back with that idea of evil, pilbalon is injurious, adverse, hostile. Bisha is an archery term that connotes off the target, evil, the result of missing the mark. Again, it's not a positive evil, it's the absence of being on target. When love is not present, then there's an absence. Darkness is not a presence. Darkness is an absence of light. And that's why, Yeshua talks so much about being the light of the world. Don't put your light under a bushel basket. In other words, don't hide behind hostilities and fears, but rather bring it forward. Otherwise, there'll be a tendency to be off the mark. And there's several different uses of the word in that those last few passages from Matthew. And then that word moves into the use of a noun, evil words, thoughts, acts, deeds, when one is locked into Matthew 6:34, the evils thereof of that particular time period. Thoughts that are not connected to love, words that are not connected to love. Nasha, all men, descendants of Adam, the first man. So we hear the Aramaic understanding of Adam is the red clay, is this body-mind unit, and then comes into this expression the actual created human, that created state of love that takes over this Adamos, this piece of red clay. And if we get stuck in the mind of man, as Yeshua addressed Peter when he's trying to inhibit Yeshua from carrying out the demonstration of death having no hold over him. You remember he addresses Peter directly as Satan, and he says, for you think in the mind of man, you think in the mind of Adam, Adamos, the red clay, rather than being attuned to your higher faculties of which you are capable of doing. And so there's several variations on the theme referring to this carbon-based memory system and being locked into the constructs of the mind of the red clay, the body-mind unit. Several references from the beginning, brachet, at the very beginning, this beginning. The suffix CEAN is adding that to a word. It means it's pure, clean, sound, free from fault. Again, tying into Ruka de Kudsha. Ruka de Kudsha is that elemental force which undoes those things that are off base and leaves that pure, clean state. And the reason why in the worksheet there's that invitation to Ruka to step in and remove those energetic patterns that leave one in a toxic state, leave one in a diseased state. And that takes us down to the last minute or so. And I appreciate everyone who joins us, and we'll look forward tomorrow to moving to the next level. And in the meantime, invite everybody to have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the